I started falling in love not with photography but with creativity, because now I'm trying all these other different mediums, and they all inform each other. Stuff like composition, like color theory, like communication, substance, form, lighting. That is applicable across the board, right?
Hello and welcome everyone to the Edit Undo podcast. This is episode 8. It's 2022 and this is the third episode of the year. We have a great guest with us today. I've kind of said this and almost forgot to get it on tape, but I have to mention the fact that Shen sort of shares a special place in my personal network, as he was the photographer at my eldest brother Alex's wedding. And, we've got the photographic evidence to prove it. Welcome to the show, Shen. Welcome.
Oh, thanks, Alfie. Yeah, I mean it's very interesting to hear from you after all this time, because we just met in almost a social space. I was obviously working, but you were a guest and we barely spoke. But I think the way creatives are is that, like, if you see someone and you like the work and you like the way the thing's doing, then you sort of keep them in your mind. And you just like create a friendship automatically, and then like someone can speak to you many years later and you're like, how have you been, how are things going? So it's great to hear from you, and it's great to hear that you still think fondly of me. I really enjoyed photographing Alex's wedding, and I mean, weddings are so beautiful and so enjoyable, and they require a lot of faith and a lot of trust. So I appreciate being granted that opportunity, and I'm glad that I did you guys proud.
Thanks. So look, I mean, when we kind of chatted leading up to this session, we kind of went into what you're doing these days, and you've kind of mentioned that you're what people call these days a hyphenated creative. But I think or rather how I've known you has definitely been the person behind the lens. And let's maybe start off with like how you actually got there. Can you give us a little bit of the origin story?
Absolutely. I certainly, photography is is the part of my career and my skill set that I'm most confident and happy to talk about. It started very innocently. I mean, I was just a young guy, and sort of Instagram was taking off, and camera phones were becoming more accessible, and basically we were being given this tool and this ability to document our lives. And I was sort of reflecting on how the older generation, like my parents and my grandparents, um, have photo albums and have collections of photos that they would often have to pay for, or would have to develop, or would have to, there was a whole sort of process in terms of capturing images and curating them and collecting them. And despite us having more access to tools and more opportunities, I felt like we weren't having that same approach. We weren't being intentional about documenting our lives and the people in them. And so I wanted to bring that into my own life, and so I thought the easiest way to do that seriously would be to buy a camera, because then now I've financially invested in this, and then I can learn a new skill, and I've always felt creative, so it was an opportunity for me to also explore creatively. But initially, it was born out of more of a personal space of wanting to just be intentional about gathering of memories, and being present in the moment, and wondering about what I'm experiencing right now. Is this something I want to look back on So I have a camera at my side now to assist me into doing that. And so that's all it was. It was just a hobby, and I was just enjoying it. Going to music festivals, hanging out with mates, birthday parties, etc. Very casual. Like I'm a little bit of like a obsessive learning type. So anything I try and dabble with, I'm gonna be like watching YouTube tutorials or whatever. Like I just want to understand the qualities of a thing. So I'm learning some skills or whatever, but it's really it's not serious at all. And then I get offered a wedding. Of course, everyone's dream first gig, you know, when you don't know what you're doing. Someone like I just spoke about trust and the importance of something like that. And yeah, you know, I'm speaking a little bit from from having failed at that. But yeah, I'm offered this wedding and it's huge pressure, and I'm like, oh man, like I don't know, I don't think I should do this. Like I'm just a kid, like doing whatever. Um, and my partner at the time, the client was actually like a connection of hers, and she like encouraged me, you know, and I'm young and I'm in love, so I'm taking what she says, you know, I'm letting my ego be stroked. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do it, baby. Like, let's go, let's go. Um, and it was in like 2 or 3 weeks. I went to Australia to visit family, and basically I did like a crash course right before that, and then I had 2 weeks like in this foreign land when like obviously your mind is most attentive because everything is new and interesting. And I started trying to apply that that theory and the skills I've learned into now a circumstance in which there's a variety of things I'm trying to photograph. So I did that. I learned a lot. Came back, shot the wedding, and of course, as you can expect, everyone lost, right? So I made peanuts. I made like no money. Actually, all the money I made, which was like 2 grand, which was honestly like for a wedding, was 2 grand, and I spent that 2 grand on a flash to shoot the wedding. So it was zero money.
Jeez.
Um,
Wow.
and
Really.
they got probably not very good photos for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I got no money and they got no photos basically. So that's I mean, this is not a sweet story. That's what happens, right? This is not a movie. You know, you put a
Yeah.
rookie in that environment and you don't do well. Um, but
Yeah.
what was special about that was that even though it was I got paid peanuts, for me, I think I was 18, those peanuts are the only nuts I've ever earned, right? So I'm like, oh my goodness, I can make money. I can do this. This is something I'm really interested in. And at the time, I'm studying a BSc at University of Pretoria. Um, and I mean, I'm not like I've always been into science and whatever, but I'm not a good academic, and so this is like, ooh, maybe I can try some other stuff out while I'm doing this degree. You know, I think a degree for a lot of people is just buying time until you figure out what you really want to do. So I go back to university, and I applied for the student newspaper, Powder Bay, and that's actually really where the story takes off because there's a
Oh wow.
huge readership. I think this was like 15,000 students, and we released every week. So that means I was shooting
Sure.
every week, and I'm shooting student events, but I'm shooting so broadly because now it's photojournalism. You know, I just get assigned a brief. So maybe I have to photograph a rugby match. Maybe I have to photograph um, series, or maybe I have to photograph some award, some talk, whatever. You know, I don't know. I'm just being given these things, and it teaches me a lot of technical skills about how to photograph in different environments. But it also starts to broaden my world because now photography is providing access. It's putting me in places that I wouldn't normally go to, and I'm learning from those things and I'm experiencing from those things. You know, you can't photograph a talk without listening to it. So I'm learning stuff as I go. And while this is all going, towards the end of the year, well, not even towards the end of the year, a very special period in student history begins, which we all now know as the Fees Must Fall movement. And there I am on the ground with other students, and I'm documenting a national story, right? I'm now doing real journalism stuff, and other larger publications are referencing our work because obviously we have a degree of authenticity and a degree of access
Wow.
that our coverage quite a good reflection of what's going on. The guy who's leading the protest, I know him, right? We were just having drinks last night, so I know that he was like, "Oh, bro, at 5 a.m. we're going to be at this location." So he was first on the scene, and we're documenting that. And yeah, so I mean, that was insane, like incredible. Being in that moment. But what was even more special about that is that then it was also sort of like a political awakening for myself, because, like I said, you can't
Yeah.
document a subject or an event without
Mm.
participating in it and learning about it. So I'm hearing about the struggle students are having. I'm hearing about financial exclusion, about the increased rates for foreign students, about the poor food in res and all these things, and I'm realizing, wow, like, not only is this a cool opportunity for me, I have a very important role in telling this story, and my work can directly impact how people feel about this movement. And so that really was giving
Yeah.
me an idea of the power of storytelling, the power of photography, the power of documentation, and how important it is to go into that space honestly and as an observer, and to try and tell the truth. And that, the love is just growing. Now I'm like, wow, I can make money off this thing. This thing is taking me places. And on top of that, I feel that my work is meaningful, that I'm gaining purpose in this as well. This is basically the freaking Ikigai Venn diagram. It's a
Yeah.
true case study. So I'm completely in love with it. And I do that, and then the next year,
Yeah.
I've been at the paper for a year, and the next year I get made visuals editor, which basically means I now lead all the photographers on the paper, and the cartoonists and the designers, and
Wow.
basically
Yeah.
all the imagery, right? So that's
Sure.
now also teaching me about how to
Yeah.
lead a team, how to transfer skills, how to work with people who communicate through different ways, and just helping everyone find their
Yeah.
voice, and finding a way to tell the story properly. So that's awesome, and opportunities are opening, and I'm getting gigs, and I'm getting a reputation,
Yeah.
partly because I'm being able to produce these very niche works. Yeah, so while my photography career seems to be blowing up, um, my scientific career, or rather my academic career, seems to also be blowing up, just in a completely different way. So I was doing a triple major. I was doing
Choose.
a genetics, psychology, human physiology pairing, and sort of the way that was sold to us is, with genetics being the cards you dealt, psychology the mind, physiology the body, and together you get like this awesome understanding of a human being. But that's of course not actually how education or academia works. All of those departments worked in silos. There was no cross communication. You just learn what you learn, and freaking it's whatever. It's not about BSc. So I get to my final year. Everything's going great, except for genetics, which is extremely difficult, to put it lightly. So I'm doing well. I'm passing all my modules. I'm getting distinctions for a few, and I'm failing genetics terribly. Like, I have 4 genetics modules. I fail all of them. So there's no question about it, right? I'm not doing well in genetics. So the year ends, and I'm here with I guess this hubris of a young man. Because I did the Cambridge system. I went to university a year early when I was still 17. So I was like, oh, I've got like an extra year. So tell you what, I'll just do genetics only for a year, and two modules a semester, I should be able to knock it out the park, and maybe even get honors entrance. Why do I want to get into honors for this thing I suck at? I don't know. It's just like trying to follow the rules. So I go into the next year, and first semester immediately humbles me. I failed genetics one. I got to fail the one, and gets supplementary exam for the other, which is basically almost failed the other, right? So I'm like, whoa, okay, literally, this is now my only focus, right? And now this is also like an additional 6 months on this thing, and I'm not improving at all. And that sucked a lot, but it taught me something very important, which is basically the difference between something that interests you and something that you are either good at or that you are passionate about. And I had to stop beating myself up and come to the realization that, I can maybe read a book on genetics or watch a TED talk, but this is not something that's going to be my career, and this is not something that's for me, and that doesn't mean I'm dumb or anything. I'm excelling in everything else I'm applying myself to. So I just had to find that, it wasn't my fit. So
Yeah.
I go to the department. I switch to double majors, and there's a bunch of, obviously everyone's got a bit of a fight story with the university admin, but it time goes by. I have to fill up some modules here. There's this thing, that thing, a bunch of technicalities I have to get through to get the new degree, which I eventually do. But what happens is now my studies have been extended by what was essentially a year and a half, and so that by the time I did
Wow.
complete my degree, I had been doing photography for many years at that point, 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
So it was looking like a real good option. I can go find an internship in some lab or whatever, or I can do this thing that I'm making money in, that I'm enjoying, that's fulfilling me. And so I think we know which choice I made. And that's the photography story. I mean, I can keep going till present day, but I think you guys should say a few words in this in this podcast too.
Yeah. So I think I think there are a few things that are interesting about your journey. I think you sort of mentioned the first photography gig that you had, and how that kind of started like in a rocky way, and then it's sort of
Yeah.
like you sort of had the same sort of experience in the way that you studied. So I think something that might be interesting is like that mindset when it sort of seems like things are not panning out, and like you've been kind of like put on the spot, and you kind of need to find a way forward when things look like they're crumbling around you. Because I mean, that's
Yeah.
something that I too have personally experienced. I think like right before I dropped out, I didn't make exam entrance for any of my exams, and I had like I think
Yeah.
8 subjects, and that's because I'd stopped going to class before before it had even reached the exams. I was kind of just like I was already mentally checked out, and I was
Checked
trying to
out.
build a
Yeah.
portfolio so that I could start working. And I think that might be a thing, because I find that happens with a lot of creatives who sort of end up taking the lesser beaten path. There's sort of like this stage where they're kind of like, okay, I'm gonna take the dice, I'm just gonna roll them. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's adversity, sometimes it's like, when you decide to leave your 9 to 5 and go and freelance. Like for different people it comes up in different ways. And I just think it's interesting how that sort of theme seems to come up with so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Alfred speaks back to the topic of intuition that we chatted about in one of the previous episodes, that creative generally, we really in tune with ourselves, and we keep seeking that feeling of what does my instinct say? What is my intuition telling me I should do or go?
and and that's very true. And I think like every now and then there are times where your intuition can kind of lead you into a little bit of
Yeah. Of course.
into a little bit of a trap. But I think that's part of the creative process, like
Absolutely.
it's not something that's perfect, and it's not something that sort of resolves itself every time. And I think over and above intuition, because I think everybody has that sense of intuition, but I think you might say that we maybe follow it a little bit more than usual. We sort of maybe rely on it more than it might deserve. And so sometimes it burns us and sometimes it works out well. And so Shen,
Right.
I've
Right.
actually have a question speaking about that. When before we kind of came to this episode, when I first got in contact with you, you told me a little bit about what you're doing at the moment. And I think sort of relying on your intuition was something that definitely happened for you. And you spoke a little bit about your time during COVID and how that affected you. So let's just maybe fast forward a few years from the varsity time, and you've kind of started
Yeah.
to develop yourself as a photographer, right? And then suddenly the whole world just switches on you.
Kids
Can you
flu.
talk to us basically? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was like a reckoning. I mean, I think because my photography was born so fruitfully that maybe I was a little bit spoiled. I was being flown out. I was being paid good money, and so it reached a point where it became a job. They always say do what you love and you won't work a day in your life. No, what happens is like you do what you love and then it becomes work. And then you don't love it anymore, right? And that's what happened to me. I was shooting, and then on my off days, I was like, I'm not gonna shoot. Like that's my job. Like I was shoot for free. Now I was like just work for fun. No, thank you, right? So I fell out of love with photography quite a bit. It really just became my career. And then COVID came, and well, now there's no work. That was completely gone, and I don't mean bookings were down 80%. I mean bookings were down 100%. There was
Sure.
there was nothing, and so I'm now in the space where I have the discipline of an entrepreneur. I have the mindset of someone who's been self-taught their career, and so I want to do something. I can't sit at home. I taught myself productivity. So I start working on myself. It's the only thing to work on. So I read a lot of books. I work out. I meditate. I eat right. And I start learning new skills. I start exploring the Creative Cloud suites. I learned Illustrator. I learned After Effects. I learned InDesign. What else am I going to do, right? So I'm like trying to illustrate. It was actually funny. Like, so I wanted to learn animation. This is maybe a little gem, right? I wanted to learn animation, and then to animate, I was like, shit, I need assets
Yeah,
to
something.
to make them move, right? Cool. So let me learn Illustrator so that I can like create assets and then animate them. Then I was like, wait, to illustrate, you need to know like basic stuff like how to draw and form, which I don't know. So then I was literally like pencil and paper. Like that was where I found myself from
Oh
animation
God.
to like sketching, because it was like, oh my goodness, there's actually so many layers to that, right? And obviously I was kept very busy by this whole process. Um, and what happened is that I started falling in love, not with photography but with creativity, because now I'm trying all these other different mediums, and they all inform each other. Stuff like composition, like color theory, like communication, substance, form, lighting, that is applicable across the board, right? So I might be learning one thing, but it's inspiring me in another space, right? And so this is slowly, I'm falling in love with photography again, but I'm just falling in love with creation, and I'm falling in love with
Yeah.
with the arts, right? And so I spend all this time, and it's like building up to something. There's an energy, and so after, I think that was 2020. It feels like yesterday, but after 2020, because like 2021 was last year. No, ridiculous. So after 2020, I moved houses to here where I am now, and I set up the studio. And I was like, okay, I'm not getting my event gigs anymore. I'm not getting my international gigs anymore. Borders are closed, gatherings are forbidden. So maybe let me start thinking about the industry. Okay, digital content's definitely going to be where it's at. Everyone's moving online. Everyone's trying to create e-commerce stores, etc., etc. If I'm doing product photography, if I'm doing content creation, then I'm gearing myself towards this new creative economy, right? So I'm like, cool, got a studio. So people hire me for my studio, and obviously no one's picking up the phone, because there's guys who've been doing studio stuff their whole career who are the product people. You can't just be like,
Yeah.
hi, my turn. So So I was like, okay, I guess I gotta like show that I'm good. I gotta like create a service offering, right? Basically. So I conceptualized the shoots and I was like, look at me, hey, from photography being a job to now me creating for the sake of creating, producing works for the value in themselves to show like, look, this is a beautiful thing, this is what I can do. And where that goes, who knows, right? So I try and put all these new skills I've got into place and I put a treatment together. I come up with the concept. I come up with the makeup references. I find a makeup artist. I find models. I conceptualize the set. I find a set dresser, and I do this cool shoot, which I do, and it's cool. It turns out actually I wasn't mucking about. Like we can create beautiful things. Um, and what was born out of that
Yeah.
is one of the people that attended that shoot, the set dresser, his name is Naz. He came through and he helped me build this thing, and we were really working well together. We had this energy, this sort of hive mind where our ideas were easily communicated, easily translated, and you could see we were both really good at what we did. And it was the first time we were encountering someone who was like meeting us where we were at. I'm trying to communicate an idea coming from like a media background, and he's trying to receive that idea and communicate back. He's a fine artist, an installation artist, coming from like a true creative background, right? From a building perspective. And so we're like, whoa, okay, this guy's like really cool. And whatever, it's just like, okay, that was a cool experience. We created something really beautiful. And now I'm definitely of the mindset of you don't leave it there, but I was ready to leave it there and just be like, oh, I met a cool guy. But Naz wasn't. So a week later, he calls me. He's like, yo, man, I need photography. Please come through to this client in Morningside. So I'm like, oh man, well, I'm trying to get work. I'm coming through. So I go over to
Yeah.
Morningside and he's struggling with some tech issue, some like big display screen, and we're trying to basically, I don't know, let me not get into the specifics, right? But it's not photography or art is the point, right? It's problem solving and creative thinking. And we're like, just these two guys that were like, just encountered a problem and we start solving it, right? Like for no reason. We're just like trying to get this thing done. And we're like, oh, we're doing that thing again. We're like, but what if? Have you tried? Da, da, da. And it's like, oh yeah, yeah, exactly, right. And we're going back and forth like that. And while we're there, the reason he called me is that this building we find ourselves in, trying to fix a screen, is basically a new development that's been purchased by a developer, and he needs photography and he needs some artistic installations and stuff like that. But as a developer, he's very all about execution, all about results. So he's just asking us to do everything. There's these two guys here. Like, why am I going to go look for someone else? Hey, dude, can you what are we going to do with this furniture? What are we going to do with this lighting? What are we going to do with these walls? I'm thinking about the second floor. Are we going to theme it? Are we going to theme all the floors? What are we going to do with the entrance? Guys, I've got a restaurant here. We need photos of the menu. We need video. We need website. And we're like, just like, okay, man. And we're just like, yeah, all that stuff. I know how to do that stuff. I've been doing that stuff since always. This guy, I've known this guy my whole life. We're a team. Like we're starting saying we, us, yeah, sure, we can do it. Like no problem, whatever. And then we like walk out, and then we're like, and we come to the studio, and we're like laptops next to each other, like grinding it out, doing that what if thing a lot. And it's like 12-hour days for like a month, 2 months, and we're just like saying yes to every brief, and we're kind of killing it. I mean, obviously, some stuff is technically imperfect, but there's there's really good ideas and there's really good solutions that's coming out, and I feel like, oh, okay, this is really a strength we're finding, is that we're being asked to do all these things, and maybe we don't always know how to do it, but we know what is needed, right? I know that when you say, what are we doing with these walls? um, that I can think not just, oh, let's put some wallpaper on it or let's just paint it, but I'm thinking, okay, what are we doing with these walls? To the point of, should we knock a wall down? Should we put a sculpture on there? Should the menus be on the walls or should the menus be floating? Should whatever, right? That's the whole process. Just figuring it out. What are we doing with these walls? Small example. And we're
Yeah.
like, man, this is going great. Like we're solving a lot of problems. We're coming up with a
Yeah.
lot of good ideas, and we're making money because we're like invoicing because we're like, bro, you can't ask me for stuff tomorrow, and like I'm working 12-hour days. Like we're
Yeah.
sending like invoices. We're like, okay, that you can pay, and because the developer is so set on just getting things done, he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Just like what's more important to me is that it's done and it's done right by tomorrow. Because every moment it's not done, I'm losing money. So I'll rather just pay you guys to solve it. So we're like, okay, man, let's just keep doing that. And yeah, that's since May last year. That's really where it's been at. We formalized it. I think after a month, we were like, I mean, I know I just met you, and I know that this is a commitment. And I got down on one knee, but it was just a moment where like we had both reached a point in our career where it's like there's only so much I can do as one person, but I'm so unimpressed with a lot of people, you know. And finally, I've met someone who, and there's people I'm also like not unimpressed with, but are too similar to me. Obviously, as a photographer, I know a lot of other photographers. The power of two photographers is not much greater than one, right? But the power of a photographer and an artist, or if you had an engineer and an artist, then there is huge value being created, right? Because now you are bringing
Yeah.
disciplines together
Yeah.
and creating a gestalt, right? You're bigger than the parts.
Yeah.
And we found this thing, and so we're like, let's do it. And I mean, it's going great. It's going great. I've learned so much. I've done
Yeah.
so much. It's really fulfilling, more than anything. Finally feeling like I'm more than just a photographer. I'm someone who's an artist and has an understanding of all sorts of spheres of what makes something beautiful or interesting or compelling. And I'd like to be involved in every part of that. And yeah, now I can be.
Sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Shen. I was looking at your portfolio before we had a chat, and usually photographers tend to lean towards a certain distinctive style or medium, but your portfolio is quite broad. There's wildlife, there's fashion, there's studio, natural lighting, non-natural light. And yeah, I just want to get your take on, is there a specific route that you would like to go in, or what is this exploration of broadness that I'm seeing?
Well, so in terms of photography, my love has, since it was born out of this place, is always going to be in photojournalism. And so I would love to go back to telling stories that matter and shedding light on important things. But as a creative, it's all about those ideas because spending so much time in the industry as a photographer, what I would realize, and also with this developer actually, I would realize is that the problem has often started before the brief was set. You've asked me now to come and with the developer, I'll give you an example. He said, we've got a restaurant. We need to photograph the food so that we can have content to advertise, website, whatever, right? Makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that there is no menu set. So we end up photographing basically any conceivable dish the chef could come up with, right? He just made everything he thought he could do, and we photographed it all. And now, like, we're wasting time. They're spending money, and food is going to waste. And the solution was not to take food photos. The solution was to set a menu, So now we're executing a lot, but ultimately the goal for us and the new business is having that seat at the table and being able to say, listen, I think actually what's needed here, in the Edit Undo podcast, is you guys need better microphones. Before you need a social media presence, or maybe you need to be onboarded on more streaming sites, or maybe you need whatever. But we need to look at that before we're called in and we're asked to come and redesign your studio where you guys are recording it. Maybe that's not where the most value can be found.
Yeah.
So that's the dream. Yeah, that requires reputation, that requires a lot of portfolio, and that's what we've been doing. But yeah, I think that's super important, not just for our clients, but for the industry as a whole. I think
Yeah,
that
and I think
Africa
that
and go for it, Alfie.
sorry, I was just gonna say that that definitely speaks to the question that Stephanie was asking about the broadness of the portfolio, and I think what you're describing is also even just broadness in the creative solutions, because you know,
Yes,
especially when you're such a specialized creative, it's easy when you're holding a hammer for everything to look like a nail.
right,
But
exactly.
there comes a point in your career as a creative, regardless of your discipline, where you realize the thing that's valuable isn't what you can output. The thing
Right.
that's valuable is how you see the problem and how you approach
Yeah.
it. And
Mm,
essentially the solution that comes out of that eventually changes. And I mean, it's exactly the same in UX. Often you'll find a startup that's like, we need an app. And they're actually like, no, first what you need is a
A
business
business
model.
model.
let's take it back, guys. Let's start in bare basics. Yeah, exactly.
It's hilarious that we thought of the same example.
It tells you how often it happens.
Exactly. And I think what you're mentioning, Jen, is so on the money. And I think a lot of creatives could really do so much better for themselves by taking that sort of approach to things. And look, I understand why
Yeah.
a lot of us don't, because it's scary to step outside of the your realm where you're a pro. You know, like when you're a photographer, you can make that lens do all kinds of things. But as soon as you put that pencil
Mm,
to paper,
mm,
suddenly you're a beginner again. And I think that's the challenge
yeah.
that we as creatives face. And so maybe on that vein, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to actually have to step outside of your comfort zone? Because like, you know, figuring out how to service a developer is not very similar to taking
A
photos. Can you
BSc
tell?
or, yeah, a photographer.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. I mean, it was terrifying. I think that there were a number of things that made it possible. Um, I think first thing, the biggest thing I can say is my partner, right, is having Naz, because we believed in each other, right? So while I'm having my imposter syndrome and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, he's having that, right? The same experience, but I don't have it about him. I find him incredible. I find him highly talented. So if I'm pitching an idea that I think he's going to be doing most of the work on, if I'm like, oh, let's review the floor plan. I'm not the designer. I'm not the one who can draw. He's there with the iPad, and I'm like, yeah, we'll knock it out the park. And now he has to do that. And he would do the same. Like, yeah, we can shoot a video. We can any sort of media solution. And I'm like, yeah, like absolutely, because I'm backing him up, right? So we're like pushing each other, and that's like really allowing us to embrace the environment. Second of all, there was no time. Like we have said yes, and it is due in 2 days. So you got to get it done, or you got to fail. And we're not trying to fail. So yeah, while we're freaking out and panicking, you just channel that energy into YouTube tutorials, into reading obscure manuals, into this thing and that thing, because you're trying to arrive at that solution. You know what you want. And yeah, maybe you don't know how to do it, but you're gonna figure out how, because you've promised someone, and you've billed for it. So that's the other thing. And then the final thing is that year of pandemic, um, that year of learning, that year of investing in myself was necessary. I was in the best place in my life. I felt great. My body felt great. My mind felt great. I felt capable because I had just worked on um, growing, right? And so I was like, if any version of me could do this, it's this version. So I think the culmination of all of those things is what happens. Yeah, basically the answer is it's super uncomfortable, but usually there's no option otherwise. You just do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you spoke to it now again. What what you were saying, that beautiful complimenting that you guys were doing it to each other.
Mm,
I think if you were both photographers, you probably have similar insecurities about your
mm,
profession, your skill. And if you're not, if you're two opposites or two from two different backgrounds, it's a lot easier to compliment each other and encourage each other, put each other in that uncomfortable position. Because, I don't know how hard it is to move from still life photography or natural or journalism photography to shooting video media.
right.
I don't know. But so it's easy for me to endorse you and say, yeah, of course we can do it. I know he can,
That's
he'll
so
figure it
true.
out.
Yeah, Daz is pitching videos, and I'm a photographer, and in his mind, he's like,
Yeah.
he's got a camera.
Yeah, it's got a
And I'm like,
camera, right? And you're like, yeah, and same with you. He does space design, so let's knock off some walls and figure it
yeah,
out.
exactly. He's like, I've been just building sculptures, and now I'm having him
Hmm.
design entire floors, And I'm like, yeah, it's the same thing, right? Just thinking in 3D, you can do that.
Yeah.
That's so
So
amazing.
now that it's just the two of you, are you guys looking to expand your team? Is this a business that you are going to invest in full time? In essence, I guess what I'm asking is, would you want to stay in this freelancing or self-employed space, or is there something else you want to explore?
Well, I'll give you two answers. So in terms of the business, I
Mm,
think we're very happy where it's at. What we're actually trying to do is expand the team, like you say, but in a way more of like
mm,
have a lot of resources we can call upon. Because while we were fulfilling these briefs, it was incredibly taxing, incredibly hard, and
yeah.
not always worth it, And so sometimes, now that we realize, okay, we can get these clients, we can come up with these ideas. Maybe someone else can be the one who executes that brief, because what we're trying to do is just have the idea.
Mm,
So someone else can build the sculpture, someone else can dress the walls, someone else can design the menu. We're just here
yeah.
to make sure that that's cohesive and that's where things are. So for that reason, with the broadness of our of what we do, because it's just consultancy, which is basically a big word for, you just tell people what to do. We need a huge amount of people we can call on, and every single person I meet, if they do something I've not heard of, like I listen to, I forget her name now, podcast, who's a service designer, right? I've never heard of service design. But now, if I know a service designer, I can offer that to a client. That's a new solution I can think of. And I can say, yeah, we do service design. I have a service designer who can knock that out the park. And so it's really about gathering those people and pushing that. And then personally, yeah, really want to keep doing that. I really want to find more balance. I want to spend more time. I often fluctuate where I work a lot and I'm with screens or whatever, and then like I just stay at home and I like do gardening and I just like
Yeah.
completely switch off, and
Yeah.
it's like all the time in the tech, in the digital, and then like all the
Yeah.
time in the earth, in the grass, like, and I'd like that to be just a bit smoother. That would be great. And then yeah, I also did a lot of work last year with an extended reality company, and that was super rewarding and super fascinating. And now with Meta, and I mean, just even if Meta didn't happen, the fact that I was now experiencing
Mm.
VR and I was experiencing that space, I would just love to do more of that,
Can
and
you
I hope I can.
can you share a bit about that VR experience? I mean, you hear about VR being up and coming. We just hear it left, right, and center, but so few of us actually have experienced it.
Yeah.
Can you maybe share, what you were doing with it, and yeah, what was that
uh,
experience
ab-
like?
Absolutely. Well, I did three things with them, but I think two of them are kind of the same, and they're what's important. So the company is called Habitat XR, and their whole pitch is that
Wow.
they connect people to nature through technology. So they're using virtual reality and extended reality to enhance conservation efforts and to basically help transport people into wildlife environments and into wildlife spaces to create empathy so that people take action to
Sure.
perform some environmentalism and stuff like that.
Mm.
So
Right.
one of their major clients is the Ellen Fund, in partnership with the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund. And so what we were doing there is there's a new campus that is being developed in Rwanda, and in that campus they have a 360 cinema that Habitat actually built a couple of months ago. They built it themselves, and in that cinema we were basically filming pieces that will be shown in the cinema. And one of them is a sort of like a story piece of Tara, who's currently the head of Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund, and her interacting with gorillas and talking about the progress um, of how gorilla conservation has looked since Diane Fossey days. And then the other one
Mm.
was for National Geographic, and that one was looking at basically Diane Fossey's legacy and how many more things they do beyond just gorilla conservation and what impact they've had over time. And so that's why I'm hopeful that there'll be more projects, because you can't have just two
Mm.
films for a cinema. You're gonna have to have more eventually. But yeah, I was helping. I was helping set up the camera. I was helping record audio. I was helping with the rigging stuff. I mean, when you're trying to film in a wildlife context, it's basically just problem solving, reacting quickly, and I think I got the gig
Yeah,
initially
sure.
because I was basically an informed set of hands. I was a guy who knew how cameras worked, who could, if I was told move it left or right, I'll do that.
Mm.
And yeah, just kept doing that, and that's sort of where I've been in that space. I'm still learning a lot, so yeah.
Wow. Sure.
Yeah. That's that's crazy. You're definitely putting the hyphen in hyphenated creative. Um, so there was something that I wanted to
Yeah, exactly. When he
that I
was like
wanted to
record
ask you
sound, I
about.
was like, never done that.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about something, and it's about sort of it's sort of like a two-sided question, because there are two things that you've kind of spoken about that I think for me that were really important. So the first was the fact of how you actually got to meet your new partner, which was that sort of shoot that you set up, because I think there's this sort of like idea that creatives have, especially once you've gotten a little bit of experience in your industry, that you don't want to do something for free or do something on your own dime. You sort of like, when
Mm.
somebody
Mm,
pays you to do work, that's the only time you're going to do work. And I think there's something interesting about letting your creative side free. And then the other thing that I think that I'll ask sort of like a follow-up question about is about when you see a strength in somebody else that you don't have, sort of taking that leap of faith. But let's maybe start on the
mm.
side of like of sort of letting your creativity out, because I find often with briefs and all of that, there's always like constraints to your creativity, and there's always like a specific element of your client's needs that you sort of need to adhere to. And so can
Right.
you tell us a little bit about like kind of what drove you to actually sort of do a project out of your own accord and kind of like on your own steam, and what that process was like.
Yeah, I mean, initially I said it was about I guess demonstrating expertise and trying to get work out of it, and that's certainly true, right? But what does that actually look like? I produce this thing. How does that actually get me gigs? We've seen how, by completely changing my career. But in terms of actually what I've done with those works, I've made no money off them. And I think what actually it was about challenging myself and about exploring um, different things. I hadn't done a creative shoot since maybe the first year of photography that I had done, right? And now, and a big barrier to why I hadn't done anything since was, yes, I was being paid to do it, and also I had now developed this standard, this unachievable level of like what good a good work will be, because I obviously know from a technical level and from an experience level what an excellent piece is, right? So then I'm going to expect that from myself, but then like I don't always have excellent ideas. I don't always know what to create. That's if we knew what to do, then we would all just do that, right? But we don't. We struggle, and that's why art block and writer's block is a thing. So what I've found in many other spaces is that just getting involved in the process really helps nurture good ideas and helps things be born. So I did it so that I could say, okay, I know how to conceptualize a shoot. I know what makeup I would want. What do all these things look like together? What happens when you actually start looking at the process, when you start intentionally trying to create at a high level, almost scientific approach. It's still there. What are the pieces of this thing? How do I test it? And I think that's where it came from. And I think it was so beautiful and so good because I just went in there blind, not really knowing, just creating for the sake of creating, feeling like I have something to express, I have the talent, I have the ability. How do I show it? And it was born out of that.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think that's so right. Like, I think there's also something interesting and something a little bit different when you're not doing it for somebody else, because
Yeah,
like I find like there are points in a project sometimes, especially if it's something challenging, where you just tell yourself like, okay, I'm struggling, but as long as the client is happy, I'm okay with it. I can rest easy. But when it's your own piece, essentially you're held to your own standard. Like there's no client for you to say
yeah,
as long as they're happy. It's sort of like your own an expression of yourself in a sense.
yeah.
And I think maybe just a tangential thought. I think that's one of the things that I think a lot more creatives should be doing, because it's one of the things that brings creatives together.
Yeah.
An interesting thing that I found is that when a creative conceptualizes a project and brings other creatives together, something special happens. Because I feel like when it's a brief that's from someone who is outside the context of that industry or that skill set, you can tell. You can tell that it wasn't conceptualized by someone who is native to that industry or that
Right.
discipline. And and I think that might be a reason why you sort of managed to spark a relationship with your newfound partner, which is kind of brings us to the second part of the question, because I find like you will you'll come across people who make an impression on you, and you'll come across quite a few of them, but there's almost a leap of faith that you need to take to sort of say like, I'm gonna try and turn this into something more than it is, more than maybe just one project. So can you maybe talk a little bit about like, I think first what you saw that necessarily caught your eye. You spoke about this sort of like reciprocal communication, but like you sort of feel that in the during the project or while you're doing the work, and then you go home and then you're kind of like separate from the experience, and you start to question like, should I keep doing this on my own, or do I need to start working with someone else? Because especially when you're in the freelance space, you get very comfortable with your own capabilities and relying on
Right.
yourself
Yeah.
and not necessarily needing people outside of that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a profound question, right? Because this person has changed my life now, and it's like, how did that really happen? And I think, first of all, there's a lot of respect there. The fact that there is this person who is clearly capable, clearly skilled, yet is treating me like I'm an equal, like I know exactly what he's talking about, and meeting him at that level. And I feel like sometimes that energy is not there. It's either like I'm doing it by myself, like don't worry about it, which isn't disrespectful, or it's like you don't know what how to be involved in this, so just stay out of it, which is disrespectful. But it was just absolute like warmth and respect and like true genuine desire to collaborate and to create something beautiful. I think the focus was outside of ourselves, right? We were just focused on the product, and that was very, very beautiful. That's, I guess, more of like a spiritual or emotional or personal connection that was crucial. And then in terms of actual workflow, I think that we do have like a very interesting process. So I would say Naz is just like 1,000 ideas a minute, right? He's so good at just coming up with things, at pattern seeking, at conceptualizing. And so for most of the part, there's a crossbreeding situation. But for most of the part, he will come up with an idea about for something, and then I will interrogate the idea, and he will accept those interrogations. And this is actually where the magic is happening when we're solving problems, because he will have 5, 10,
Yeah.
15 ideas, and I'll help him cut them down, refine them, and then I'm saying, okay, so you said maybe we should build this thing. Then I can say, what are we building it out of? Then he's like, well, if we build it out of this, then that. If we build it out of this, then that. Then he comes up with another 100 ideas. Then I'm like, okay, that material's too expensive. That's too heavy. That's hard to transport. This thing, that thing, longevity. Where are we locating the thing? Yada yada. And then we refine. Keep doing that process of, okay, I'm creating constraints, and he's coming up with ideas within that box, and then I constrain the box, and so on and so on. And then by the time we get to that final process, it's an ironclad idea. It's beautiful, and we're both very happy
Yeah.
with it. He's participated at every step. I've participated at every step. We both feel like we own what we've come up with, and I think that's
Yeah.
also super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Sure.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably coming to the sort of closing stages of this. Maybe if we could just get kind of like one or two more questions out of you for you to share with everyone. What would you say, or what trait or aspect of yourself has contributed the most to where you are today? Like, is there a specific personality trait or a specific aspect of you as a creative that has contributed most to where you are?
That's surprisingly an easy answer. When I was younger, I came across this sociological term, which is called cultural capital. And if you're familiar with me, that was actually my first business out of university. And what that refers to is the value of something culturally, not financially, right? It's that moment when you're wearing that limited edition Air Force One, and you're walking somewhere, and some sneakerhead stops you, and they're like, bro, wow, like I've been looking for those, whatever, they have that moment. Or you have a collector's edition of a comic, or you reference The Dark Knight in the beginning of this conversation, and Alfie enjoys it. That's all cultural capital, right? And what I wanted to be was a collector of those things. I wanted to make sure that I learned about everything and anything. I had a curiosity and an intense interest in everything. I was never too good for some field, so that I can walk into any conversation, and I have something to contribute. If you tell me this is your passion in life, this is your interest, I've heard of it, or at least I'm super willing to hear about it. You're going to be the first one to give me that knowledge. And so I would say that it's helped me have so many conversations. It's helped me learn so many skills, and it's just made my life fuller, because I'm enjoying the world more. There's so many things
Yeah.
to take interest in, and I would just say foster that creativity, learn about everything and anything, because everything is cool, man. It's just everything is awesome.
Agree, definitely agree. Shen, I want to ask you a question that's maybe a bit unrelated to your career or profession. When we chatted, I think it was yesterday, you also had a neck piece. Is there a story behind it? It looks quite distinctive. Can you maybe tell me about it? Is it a different one that you're wearing today?
I actually don't know. So I have a few, so it could be different or it could be the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's part of collecting cultural capital. Almost every piece I
Yeah.
have is from somewhere or from some material or something that's interesting. Um, so there's that. But this piece is from Rwanda, and I got it when I was there with Habitat, and
Nice.
I've been enjoying it. I think its design is really beautiful. It's made from cow horn, so it's a
Mm.
sustainable material, but it's still
Mm.
connected to something organic, something living. In a time when we were moving more towards the digital and the recreated. And I'm just
Yeah.
trying to own more African things and engage more with African things because I think that's actually while I'm talking about we want to create these ideas, I want those ideas to be African and to be unique and to be representative of my context and my country. And so that means that
Mm.
the resources and the media I consume has to be African. And so that's the answer there.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That's beautiful and that's actually so inspiring. Yeah. I think as people living in the African continent, we often lack that. Especially me as a white female in South Africa and not really having a distinctive heritage of where I'm from.
I mean,
It can
I'm mixed race, so like I have even my lineage is one generation long. There's nothing to reflect on, but that's a whole nother conversation.
yeah.
You know, what is
Yeah.
culture? Yeah.
Yeah. That can be
But I
part
like
two of the
that.
podcast. Um, Look, I think Shen, with you, we could probably go on forever, but I think so far we have done our audience justice. Maybe before we sort of close out, where can people sort of find you? Where can they follow you?
I don't hear you quite clearly, but I think you're basically asking me to plug my stuff, which is,
Exactly.
I guess, something we have to do. In terms of my photography and whatever, my Instagram is probably the best place, which is just
Mm.
Shen Scott. I think I'm the only Shen Scott, but if there isn't, then it's at Shen_Scott. Same on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter. Um, and then for the studio, it's yeah, we don't have a lot set up. We never got to talk about the name. That's a shame. But the website is shenchem.com. So ShenShem.com. And that name is special because my name is Shen and Naz's Chinese name, because my name is also Chinese. His name is
Oh,
Shen.
wow.
So almost fated. Yeah.
We will definitely drop the links for both of these on the podcast so people can just go and have a look.
Yeah, and then on the subject of collaboration and working outside of your medium, I've really been enjoying networking and speaking to people lately, really enjoying this podcast. So on Instagram, my phone number is there. You're totally welcome to just WhatsApp me. If you have any
Amazing.
ideas, if you want to work on anything, if you just want to talk, everyone's going to benefit from that. So
Yeah,
please do.
Amazing.
definitely.
Love
Please
that.
do reach out to Shen. If for those who are listening and can't see his face, if you go on Instagram and you just see a dude with an illustrious beard, that's probably Shen. Um, but thank you so much, Shen, for making the time to chat with us and being so willing to share your story. It's been a
Thank you,
good one.
guys. It was really fun. It's always very special to also reflect on your own journey, and
Yeah.
there's always little lessons and things you find out. So you guys have given me a clarity and a wonderful opportunity as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, it's been amazing hearing about your journey and just the challenges you have overcome, and definitely excited and gonna keep my eyes on to see what's coming next for Shen Scott.
That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the first edit undo meeting because I think based on the guests so far and you guys, like that might just change the world when that happens. When such is possible.
We'll definitely arrange to meet up.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Cool.
All right,
And
guys.
thanks for everyone listening. We will catch you next week.
Thanks, guys. Peace.
Cheers.